Today on the No Gray Areas podcast, we welcome Jeff Rasor, speaker, coach, and founder of Core Heart. In this episode, we dive into the dangers of passive dreaming, the power of discovering your purpose, and how understanding your core values can transform every area of your life. Let's get started. Jeff Rasor, thank you so much for joining us on the No Gray Areas podcast. Our audience doesn't really know you yet.
Sure.
And I'm going to just jump right in. We're going to come back and I want to get a little bit of background on you, but I want to just jump in and ask kind of a difficult question.
Sure.
What's a hard lesson you learned firsthand and how has that shaped you?
Yeah, it's a great question, Pat. There are a lot of challenges we all face in life, but I think when you ask that question, the greatest kind of umbrella challenge that I've actually faced many times, I wish I would have learned that lesson earlier, is to have a dream, but then not put action to it. And so what I discovered as I was processing and even writing my book a number of years ago was I felt like God showed me I was at times a passive dreamer. And when you passively dream, it's more like a wish or a hope.
Yeah.
And I think so many of us have dreams that God infused in our hearts and minds, and we hold them at a distance because they feel out of reach, or maybe that's not for me, or maybe that's just a selfish desire. But when we hold them so far away, that passive dreaming rarely leads to any of them moving closer to reality for us. And so as a child, I dreamed about being an Air Force pilot. I wanted to be Air Force Thunderbird or Navy Blue Angel, and had hoped to go to the Air Force Academy. And one day ended up, I'm in engineering school in college wondering, where did I miss that dream?
Wow.
I went and visited the Air Force Academy. I did tours and never took steps to pursue it. And really that shapes a lot of my story. And I've seen that unfortunately unfold a number of times where there's this dream, but there's this reluctance at times for us to actually pursue it and have that courage. And so while there are other harder, more challenging seasons of life, I think when we lose sight of those dreams and don't pursue them, it leaves us in a situation that can be unhealthy, but also lead to despair and discouragement at times.
Man, that's so good because I guarantee you none of our audience driving right now or listening at home, myself sitting on the other side of the table from you, none of us are probably sitting there going like, yeah, that doesn't apply to me. Like I've achieved all my dreams.
Sure.
I went after them passionately and pursued. Like no one's doing that, right? Like we all have a part of our story is that. How do you, on this note though, how do you differentiate between a dream that, because there's sometimes, my daughter asked me this years ago. She said, Dad, why would God give you a dream and then not allow you to achieve it?
Yeah.
Part of my answer to her back then was I think some dreams were never meant to be achieved, maybe. Run with that.
Yeah, phenomenal question. Not something I feel like equipped to have all the answers to. I've found that, rarely do I have the answers, but I love the search and pursuit of answers.
Boy,
and sometimes that leads us to so many things. And I think that's similar to dreaming, that there are sometimes that pursuit of the dream. In this case, from my own story, as you asked that question, there's something about the blue sky I always dreamed about. Seeing these elite teams at high performance in excellence and almost perfection, to survive those speeds in coordination was something I thought I wanted to do the rest of my life. What I learned is that God's allowed me to do that with leaders in another format. So I help leaders and teams pursue all that God's put on their heart, high achievement in a sense, in a different way. And I get to help people soar in the blue sky. Yeah. So there's a perfect example, Pat, where this dream I thought was all about the airplanes, was all about being in the cockpit. And God's like, no, I'm going to rebuild your life in a way that's going to do that same thing in a different format. And so I've been able to reconcile that difference of, hey, I didn't achieve that dream. I've never got my pilot's license. People ask, maybe someday, but I love what I get to do. And I think it's even more rich and fulfilling than I'd love to be in an F-18, that's for sure. But what I get to do on a daily basis is live out my calling. Yeah. And it is in that blue sky in a different way. And so that I just trust the pursuit of that dream sometimes leads us to something that's even better.
Jeff, I love that so much, the pursuit of the dream, because you're right. And again, I think our audience, myself, I resonate with that. There were some dreams that I really had, and I pursued those dreams, and it didn't turn out quite like I thought. Sure. But when I look back, I go, yeah, but it was pursuing them. Yeah. It led me in a direction where I'm glad I'm at today. Yeah. Or a learning, or maybe it even led me through a difficult time. But I look back and I go, gosh, I learned a lot in that time. Yeah. Just before we keep going, I got to just jump in here really quick and say, top of my bucket list. would be to be in the cockpit of one of those.
No
But my
question.
son is in the Marine Corps right now, and he was working security at a base, and just 2 or 3 days ago, I drove by, and they were
Okay.
doing an air show there.
Incredible.
And so you're watching those jets, just go
Yes.
vertical, and I can't imagine what that would feel like to be there.
I'll watch reels, on social media of people who get a ride along in a jet, and my heart beats.
Yep.
I'll still go to an air show in Huntington Beach and tear up as they go by. The power, the excellence, the training it must have required to be in those, in those seats.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
For sure.
So inspiring.
For sure. Well, going back to what you said, though, like you said, the pursuit of that, though. So you wrote a book, you have a podcast, you have and I'm going to ask later, like,
Sure.
how people can get connected to you.
Yeah.
But those are all tied. The title of all of those things are tied to the blue sky, right?
Absolutely.
Right?
It's the working metaphor of my life. It's how I see the world, Pat, and how God gave me this ability to help people see, hey, like I was sharing with you off camera earlier, like every person, if you have a heartbeat, if you're here, there's a purpose for you being here.
Mhm.
And I just believe I coined a phrase about 15 years ago called blue sky potential.
Yeah.
And I just believe every individual has this blue sky potential. And it's this idea of this unadulterated, it's like being a pilot, this unadulterated canopy of blue sky. It's 3-dimensional, it's unlimited. And when you can find why God put you here and who God really made you to be,
Yeah.
and live from that place and toward that place, it doesn't mean there aren't challenges, but the sense of fulfillment and joy and impact that comes, that's that blue sky
Yeah.
potential. And so that's been my working metaphor. That's why I do what I do
Yeah.
every day with those I get to serve. And
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, I love that too, because one of my favorite quotes, and I somehow weave Braveheart into most messages that I speak from the
fair
stage.
enough.
But I love the great theologian William Wallace.
Yes.
At the end of or near the end of the movie, when he says, "Every man dies, not every man really lives."
For sure.
And that's a little bit what you're speaking to. Is there's a lot of people that could be rolling through life, and because you don't know your purpose, and because you just, in some ways you're just existing. You go to work, you get a paycheck,
Sure.
you come home, you pay your bills. You go to work, you get a paycheck, you come home, you pay your bills, and that's just kind of life for them.
Yes.
And you're saying there's so much more than that.
There's so much more, and we never, very rarely, I should say, we pursue the life of just following the path of what everyone says we're supposed to do. We pursue something we think we enjoy. It opens a door. We start doing something. We feel like even for some that's an answer to prayer. And then you look back after a number of years and realize, man, I've lost myself in this. Life has its challenges. Work has its challenges, and we hit these, even high achievers, very successful people. You think from the outside, they look successful, they must have all they want.
Mm-hmm.
And you understand, man, something inside is still hungering for the more of what God has for them. And that doesn't always mean more money, more cars, more houses, those kind of things, although those can be temporarily, satisfying. There's often this heartbeat of like, man, there has to be more for the purpose of my life. What brings me meaning and fulfillment and allows me to live in that sense of impact to the world around me. And it is this journey of overcoming those things and what it looks like to actually break through on the way to that journey.
Mm-hmm. So when you talk about meaning and impact, because you were talking about there's things that come out of like really living with purpose and driving toward a goal or a dream, and it can lead to more money, more cars, but it's bigger than that.
Sure.
What do you mentioned like meaning and impact. What does that look like? What does that even mean? Like, let's say there's a listener right now going like, I don't even know what that means. I'd love to have that, but what does that look like?
Yeah. I love that. I just believe, and you and I share probably similar values on this, that God put us each here for a purpose, and we're uniquely made. And that is easily to be categorized as cliche and pastoral.
Yeah.
And everyone's unique. Well, it's true. Like there's never been another Pat on this earth, and there never will be. There's never been another Jeff on this earth.
Some people say thank God.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
But there's a reason you're here. This podcast's a part of it. But it's so much beyond that. It transcends that. And I just believe every person has a unique reason they're here in this time of history.
Yeah.
And part of our role, our responsibility of stewardship in our life is to pursue that and to discover it. But there is this uniqueness that each person has, and when you find that, you can really live from that. So you asked about the impact. I believe in that uniqueness, every one of us has what I call a core heart burden, or a series of core heart burdens. And burden can sound negative, it can sound weighty, it can have that negative connotation, but burden is that weightiness you carry for others, and we all have it very differently. I joke, and I don't want to offend any of your audience or our audience listening, but some people, you see these infomercials in the middle of the night that we're gonna send money to starving cats in India, which for some, that's going to make them come alive. They're going to respond to that commercial and send money and care very much. I'm not wired for that. And again, I don't want to, any of your audience that is, I want to affirm that. Yeah. But I'm wired to care about certain other things.
I was about to make a cat joke, but I'm going to be careful that I don't offend anybody.
I served it up on a tee for you. But I would say I'm wired for certain things that make me come alive. And when I live in that, the world around me is better, and they receive from that. So every one of your listeners, there's a core heart burden that I believe is put there by the fingerprints of God, that when you get in touch with that and live toward that, humanity gets better.
So give us a couple of examples of what a core heart burden would be like. Just 3, 4, 5 of them that people that you work with.
Yeah, well, I'll share mine specifically. I care deeply about who people are and how they're doing. That's a deep core heart burden. So if you and I, even before this session, we sat down where all of a sudden we're sharing stories, I could swap stories with someone like you for hours and hours and hours, because I care about who you are and how you're doing. And then I dream about, this is another part of that core heart burden, I care about helping you find what that is and unleashing it for greatest impact and fulfillment in your life. And so I love doing that with my team. I love doing that with other teams. And so that's me coming alive. When I'm in that sweet spot of that core heart burden, the world around me is better, they're strengthened, they're unleashed into their potential. And when I live that out, the world around me is better. And
so I want to get another example from you of something else, but let me just keep on yours for just a moment. When did you start realizing that was a core heart burden? You didn't have that name for it or title for it at the time, but when you look back on your life, do you go, yeah, I had that even when I was a kid when I look back? Or would you say that?
Yeah, I would say, yes, you're right. I didn't have it defined in that kind of way. And I think that's part of that pursuit for our listeners is how do you finding that pathway to define that. But as you look back through history, I could see where that was manifesting in my life, where I was moved and compelled to move into situations out of that place of care, even though I didn't understand that was working within me as a child or as a teenager, as a young adult. One of the stories where I discovered this, and we both share this journey of having pastored on church staff, was I was in the financial services industry early in my career. You climb that corporate ladder and pursue success. And at an early age in my mid-20s, I was an executive leader in a small financial planning firm for boutique kind of estate planning, investment planning for high net worth individuals. And I recognized all these advisors, these senior partners that were 20 years ahead of me, more success, had the right cars, the right pin. They're coming by my desk all the time, interrupting my work is how I saw it at the time, asking for advice, asking for direction. And I didn't recognize it at the time, Pat. But
and they had like 20 years on you.
20 years on me, all the money they needed, all the right book of clients. And here they are asking me for input. And what I recognized, not in the moment, but later in life, was that pastoral calling of shepherding, of caring, of giving sound counsel and advice was manifesting before I knew even that was in me. And that was a part of that core heart burden. Like I cared about how they were doing. Although I felt interrupted, like, okay, put my work aside. Let's talk about how you're doing.
And you think that's one reason they came to you is because they knew you cared?
They knew I cared. I must have, and I feel this happens now, I can speak to it. Like there's a genuineness that people are like, okay, I got to tell you my story. I need help navigating
I sense that with you. You're right. I mean, I just met you a few minutes ago. And I sense that from you. And that goes back to what you said before, too, about how we are created uniquely by God. So with your specific story, you would say when God, we're going to quote a verse here, knit you together in your mother's womb, when he's putting you together, creating you, he created you with this unique gift.
Yes.
And you see it when you look back. You didn't know how to define it, but you see it popping up even as a kid into your teens, your 20s, as you were just describing. Okay, so give us another one. What's another core heart burden that someone may have?
I love that. I'll share a good friend of mine I've known 25 plus years, also was a client in some of the work we do to serve high-achieving leaders. And I would say it's both knit in our mother's womb, but also through the experience of life. There's this, are leaders born or they developed, The same happens for our core heart burdens. It's in us, but how it uniquely gets shaped happens. So without exposing this client, but I'll share a bit about his story. He has his own journey in addiction recovery, and I've done a lot of work in the addiction recovery space, and he co-founded a phenomenal nonprofit that helps people with sober, active community for continuing their addiction recovery space. When he went through this process, he was in a big pivot in his career and had been in HR recruiting, had founded this nonprofit and felt like he kind of out of the corporate world in a sense, and how do I restart? And he found that core heart burden uniquely was not just for the corporate world or the nonprofit world, but truly to make a systematic impact to the addiction recovery space.
Mm-hmm.
And so that led him to write a book. It led him to be in legislation. He ended up in the Oval Office for his work. He's one of the most renowned speakers in the addiction recovery space now, and even moved, which he never would have went into entrepreneurship, but now owns and runs an addiction recovery hospital. And all of that came from that place of, this isn't just my story or I have an interest in it, but when you look about how God wired me and you connect that to my story, this is what I'm made to do. And he has that entrepreneurial speakers, as a speaker all across the country, and he'll be in someone's living room calling them out of, that lifestyle in an intervention. And everywhere in between is where he lives that cohort burden out every single day. And he's changing the world doing it. But until he could define it and tap into it, it was this cross your fingers, what's around the next corner? I'm not sure where to head. And once he did, he's unstoppable.
That's a perfect example, Jeff, like you said so well, of the combination of how God created him, but then how his life experiences, how his journey have been, right?
Yes.
And so you're saying, so for our audience or for myself, if we're trying to identify what is our core heart burden, you start to figure out a little bit like what's your personality, how are you wired, some of those personality profiles you can take, but also connecting that to our journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I just think about it for me I look back and from the time I was a little boy, I remember I hated injustices so much.
Yeah.
It just stood out to me. Like if someone was getting made fun of in the hallway or something, everybody else could just go back to class and forget it. And it just burdened me.
Yeah.
And so I look now, I'm 53 now, and I look back and I go, gosh, almost everything I've done in my life has somehow connected to that.
There you go.
But I didn't really realize that.
Yeah.
And so how would someone, let's say the listener is going, I'm not sure what my core heart burden is.
Yeah.
How do you help people identify theirs? And I'm probably asking you to take a bunch of material and narrow it down, but.
Yeah, I think, certainly we have a process that's going to guide someone through that discovery process. And we can speak to that.
We'll come back to that a little later. I'll tell people how they can connect to that.
Certainly. But I think it is searching for what brings that most meaning. There is, again, knit together in our mother's womb. I think God has placed meaning on our hearts, so it's that search for meaning. What makes you come alive, those kind of questions. Looking for those patterns, as you talked about. You always moved toward justice or felt burdened by it. And so where are those patterns you can identify? Walk with someone, whether that's a counselor, a pastor, a rabbi, or a coach or a guide that's going to help you unpack what those key turning points are in life and why they were turning points for you. And as you start to see that data, come together, you can really start tapping into that. You mentioned justice. There's a core value in you. So we have core heart burdens, but we also have core values. And a lot of leaders understand that from a corporate standpoint. Many corporations, many businesses,
churches.
Write them on
their walls.
We've got them on the wall.
And then seldom live them.
And seldom live them. This is exactly what I was writing about when I was coming up and developing this process was you can go to a company, they've got all the core values on the wall, but that interaction is not the same. We rarely take time to write our own core values, but we have them. And we live by them. So in a funny way, many companies write them aspirationally and hope they can make them exist, hope they can bring them to fruition.
Totally right.
But in our lives, we're living by them. We've just never defined
behavior.
them. Their behavior, their attitude, we respond. You're going to respond strong to justice because it's a core value of yours that aligns with that core heart burden. There's probably 3 or 4 or 5 others. And they move you. You make decisions based on it unknowingly. I often say a core value is like a riverbank. Like you're moving through life, but that core value will shape how you respond to any given situation.
It's funny that you said riverbank. I like that better because I was immediately thinking like guardrails like on a road. But I like riverbank more because I can picture like this river meandering through and it's turning.
Yeah.
But those turns are all based on what the analogy you're using are your core values.
It's guiding you. You may not know it, but it is guiding you. And
you try to help people identify what those are, those that they've been living by, but they don't even realize it.
Yeah, when you draw them out and name them and can articulate them, it gives you 2 things. One, the power to understand why you're colliding with someone else or an organization because they're living by another set of core values that are undefined for them as well. So that, man, the conflict resolution that can come because you know yourself well is powerful. But now you get to accelerate those. This is what I'm made for. This is how I'm wired. How do I position myself to be more aligned with that in life, work, relationships? Yeah. And when you do that, that's a part of that breakthrough of aligning all those things around who you really are.
Yeah, when you were talking about the conflict, I mean, this is a silly illustration, but I look back, my wife and I, we've been married for 34 years this summer. But one of her core values would be early is on time.
Right.
So sometimes that's had some conflict for us because I'm like, we don't have to be there for 30 minutes. Why are we leaving so early? But to your point, that would be a core value for whatever reason.
Yeah.
She has this value of we cannot be late. We have to be on time. It's rude to be, and I'm going to say this in a positive way about her, not a negative way. It's rude to be late. We need to respect the people that we're going to meet, and we want to be on time. That's a core value.
Absolutely.
And she may not even have known that, but she's lived that out.
She's living it out. You might have a core value of freedom. Or,
you named mine.
Exactly.
You just
there you
named
go.
mine.
See, it's there. Because if there's a collision, you're like, well, we'll get there when we get there. I want
can
the
always
freedom.
Say sorry.
Exactly. So those aren't just personality. We think about marriage or leadership in our companies. Those aren't just personalities rubbing. There are true values that are coming up against each other. And if you don't know them, it's just, man, that person irritates me. They're always late, even though they're on time, because early is on time. Or, man, they're always just free flowing. Well, man, they're irresponsible or something might be. No. That's a value of mine I'm living from. And
Jeff, I can see though, as you're talking, the value of identifying these, and then the people that we're working with or that we're spending a lot of our life with, trying to identify theirs can probably help a lot in that conflict, right?
It's transformative. And it's transformative in marriages, but it's transformative organizationally as well. When a leader, business owner, a senior pastor, or a leader of a division or a team can understand why they're saying what they want, but they're having a hard time getting their team to align to it, then now they can say, well, hey, I know you don't want to do it this way, but here's the value driving me as your leader of why I want it this way. And maybe there's still a disagreement as is that necessary, but at least I know how to articulate it and how to draw expectations to that. We've had leaders that have found that very effective in their leadership of a team just to know themselves better and experience that transformation. What we've also got to do is bring leadership teams together, walk them in a cohort through that kind of process, and now they get to appreciate and value each other in a way they never did. And it's team building, it's culture building, but not in a kumbaya, trust fall way. It's very practical where a team can step into a meeting and they're pioneering something and they can have this conflict. Oh, that's your innovator that's coming to the surface and my steward. And now we can talk through why I need to steward this innovation. And then that collaboration just increases. So it happens in marriages, happens in leadership, happens in teams. And to your point, Pat, when you know it and can articulate it, now you can speak through that filter, talk about it, and come to understanding. And that sets teams free in incredible ways.
Oh man, I can imagine. So how do people find? I'm going to ask kind of the same question I did about the core heart burden, but the core values. How would people identify them? Again, let's say someone's listening and they're going like, I don't really know what mine are. And like you're saying, if you could write those down, like if the value for me to be able to sit down and go like, here's 3 of my top values.
Sure.
I could see how that could have a huge impact on how I live out my life.
Yeah.
And relationally with other people. But what if someone has no idea?
Yeah, I'll give a couple, 2, 3 simple questions. Our listeners can start jotting down some thoughts. So,
hey, we hope you've enjoyed this episode so far. Be sure to like and subscribe to not miss a future podcast. Okay, let's get back to the episode.
I'll ask through a series of categories that are going to till the soil of, if you will, of data, internal heart data for core heart burdens and core values. But one might be, what are you passionate about? Which is not a new question. It's not new to our audience. But when you ask it through the lens of core value, you start to write a few things down. And then what I'd encourage your listeners to do is not just write down what you're passionate about, but the why behind why you're passionate about it. And so often when I'm facilitating this with a senior leader, I'll just pick an example. Something like fly fishing will come up. I'm passionate about fly fishing. Well, a lot of people might be passionate about fly fishing, but the why behind that is very different in shaping your core values. So some will say, I just love being in the outdoors. I need that freedom. I love being in creation. It's inspiring to me. I love the beauty, the colors, the sounds. There's a core value in there of creation or creativity, where another person would say, I love the strategy. I love figuring out what fly to tie and what season and what ripple in the lake or in the river. Excuse me, I'm not a fly fisherman. I say lake. What ripple in the river is that fly going to work in at what time of the season based on the temperature of the water? Well, they have this strategy core value that they care about.
Totally different.
And it's totally different than someone who loves fly fishing for being in creation. So as you ask the why behind some of those things, that's going to lead you to some of those values. I'd say another would be, what do you obsess about? Dad might always like, hey, kids, the lights are on, turn the lights off. We don't want to pay for electricity. Well, that could just be annoying dad, or it could be a personality, or it could be, I value effectiveness or efficiency or stewardship. you wouldn't have those answers. It's just dad, mad that the lights are on and we left the refrigerator door open. But if dad can understand, or leader of team can understand, it's not about the light. It's not about the heat. It's about let's be efficient at what we do because we have this responsibility. That conversation is enriched because of knowing that core value. It changes
the conversation,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And then I would say a third, which is one of the most powerful ways to find those hiding core values, is exactly what you described earlier, Pat, is what compels you to run into a situation, what almost offends you where I have to say something. Usually in that moment, a core value has been violated. So this is what you'd come back into the classroom or in that situation in traffic, whatever it might be. When you feel compelled to go into action, someone's violated a core value. You're standing in front of someone for some reason that triggered something. And I'm not saying trigger like weakness. I'm saying triggered an action to defend. Somewhere in there is a core value that is driving you to react that way. And it will frustrate you when others don't respond in the same way.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
That this goes back to the conflict, right? The
Sure.
conflict between personalities
Sure.
is that when your core value is violated, if it's not my core value, you may look at me going like, well, how can you not care about this?
It doesn't measure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's frustrating. Why does, in our teams and in our marriages and our relationships, why doesn't that matter? Well, they don't have that same burden. They don't have those same fingerprints. And we're all here for a reason. But when we can align those, man, watch out.
Yeah.
Unstoppable.
You've used probably one word more than any other words so far in this interview, and it's the word why.
Yeah.
It's come up a number of times. And I think of Simon Sinek's book, Why, right?
Sure.
Like, start with the why.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King Jr. isn't famous for his I have a strategy dream.
Sure.
It's I have a dream speech. The
Right.
dream is the why.
Sure.
The strategy is the how. But most of us spend so much time doing the how that we miss the why. So I haven't missed the fact that you keep dropping the why in there a number of times.
Yeah.
And the part that you just mentioned about how we find our core values, the part that stood out to me the most probably was like, what are you passionate about and why?
Sure. It's that purpose behind it. Why answers the question of purpose.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because an analogy used or the illustration used was so good. Someone could say like, I'm passionate about fly fishing. Well, when you ask them why though, the example you just gave was two totally different whys.
Yes.
Same passion.
Yes.
But totally different whys, which I could see can really help them lead to someone's core values.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that becomes directive in your career. If you can start to answer that why, then you can start to align your career to that. You can have two people doing the same job for two different whys. You can be asking the question, man, I feel stuck here. Or I've been running this business, but my heart doesn't come alive anymore. Why?
Yeah.
What is that thing God's calling me to that transcends this level of success and allows me to live a life of significance? But until you answer that why, it's really hard to navigate toward that. You're chasing. You're chasing success. You're chasing elusive things. But answering that why is huge. I didn't realize I was saying it, but it is absolutely core to who I am.
Yeah.
And
I can tell.
Yeah, how we serve people. Yeah.
You talk about limiting beliefs as well.
Sure.
Let's unpack that a little bit. So limiting beliefs. Everybody that's listening to this, including myself, we have limiting beliefs, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? How do those affect us, and how do we overcome those?
Sure, man. I wish I was the
expert.
Three
simple questions.
Right, yes. I wish I was the expert in this, and I wish I could say I'd solved all these problems. Again, our beliefs are shaped by kind of what's imprinted in us, but also our experience. And some of those lead to core values. Like I was raised this way, and it's a value to me, and those can be strengths. But when we're raised in a way that doesn't always serve what that dream on our heart is, that becomes a limiting belief. It holds us back from that ability to take action. And so there's, and again, this is not my expertise. I love listening to podcasts on this stuff from those that are experts, but there is this rewiring of our thinking that is important for transformation. And it comes from Scripture. I think it's founded in Scripture. We're told, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. For me, you could preach that, but to actually live that and understand it, like literally, Scripture speaks to transformation starts in the renewing of their mind. For our listeners who are followers of Christ, it might sound a little new age or a little, think positive until it works out in the end, but we're told to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. And so we talked about habits before, you and I, and some of those habits are, how do you renew your mind with truth? And that is sometimes letting go of old truths to infuse it with new truths. And I think that's the best way I've found to have breakthrough in that area, was to evaluate, what am I holding true that is either no longer true or no longer serving me, that are a belief. I'm not talking global truth, specific, I think God breathed truth. I'm talking about truths about how I see the world, how I interact with the world, how I believe about me in the world. and what are those that are not serving me, and what are those that I need to adapt and adopt really and embrace that can serve me. I think that's where breakthrough starts, and renewing that mind for that transformation. I'll give one example if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
There was early in my career, we were talking about that role in financial services. I in these interactions with these very successful leaders in our company, I recognized, because they were coming to me sharing their story, there was a lot of brokenness and a lot of what I didn't want for my future, in my marriage and in my future family.
And like you said, they were like 2 decades ahead.
2 decades
so you knew
ahead.
This is where it was going.
They had everything that in business school they teach you want and to become, but they had nothing that I knew in my spirit I wanted. And I said, God, if this is the pursuit of success, I don't want those outcomes. And so I need you to give me a why. Why am I in this space? And why do you have me here? What does leadership look like for me? Because it looks like climbing the corporate ladder is an empty pursuit at the end. And so I don't want to lean my ladder against that building. And God spoke. And, through that journaling reflection, we've talked about some of those daily habits, just gave me this mission statement. In my mid-20s, Pat, I want to use my gifts and talents to unleash the gifts and talents of those around me. And instead of pursuing that next career opportunity, I'm just going to serve everyone around me. I didn't know servant leadership at the time, but I realized if I pursue my career and ignite one light, that's one light, on fire in the world. If I help others do the same and help ignite their light, that's 10, 100, thousands potentially. And in my career, through some of the work I've got to do, I've impacted hundreds of thousands, and I can't even believe that. But it's that pursuit of what that looks like. And so as I pursued that, I recognized that there was this pursuit of that goal that changed my belief. So I lived that for 25 years, going back to the limiting beliefs. That served my career, that served my ministry, that served my impact in reaching more people than I ever thought possible. I never thought I'd reach as many people as I've been allowed to impact. But the beauty of that was, for me, Pat, in that 25 years, was that allowed me to be behind the scenes. I love being that behind the scenes leader, making others look great. I don't need the spotlight. I don't even want the spotlight. And then as God shifted my career to do more of this and become a teaching pastor and be out front as a leader, I fought that. I fought God hard on that, because my success, if you will, and significance was staying behind the scenes, making others look great. And so that value served me tremendously and served God's kingdom tremendously. And now God's like, yeah, I'm pushing you in the spotlight. And I'm like, no, I don't want that. And I've had to work on shifting that belief. So we're talking about renewing the mind. I've had to remove that hiding, being behind the curtain is how you serve God, and understanding that He has called me to shine my light. I'd rather make others shine their light. I'd rather help them, but there's a role for me to play in shining my light that can be kingdom-oriented and godly motivated, that I've had to wrestle, because I spent 25 years ingraining the best place I get to serve God's kingdom is behind the curtain. And now it's like,
and did you even use phrases like that? Did you even, when you described yourself to people, you'd be like, man, I'm a behind the scenes guy. I like to be the...
Yeah, I worked at a national men's ministry. We talked about it, Promise Keepers. I was the creative programming director. So my role in our teams was to create all the content that came from the stage and then live produce it. And folks in my role, past leaders or others, had the right to put themselves on stage, to do some announcements, to MC the event. And I love being the guy behind the curtain, stewarding those that had that platform gift. I didn't know I had it at the time. I found out I do, but even knowing I do, I don't want it. I'd rather be behind the curtain. And so God's like, hey, that value, that belief, that belief that served you to unleash others into their greatness became a limiting belief, even though it was the belief that accelerated me for 25 years. And so, there is this wrestling still internally to step into that spotlight.
So the example you used, like we have some limiting beliefs sometimes that are just they're lies that we believed.
Sure.
But there's also these beliefs we've had that they were maybe truths.
Sure.
They weren't lies, but they, as the phrase you used, they were old truths.
Yeah.
So I want to dig into that a little bit, because you referenced it a little bit. I often say truth is truth whether you believe it or not, right?
Right.
But we're talking about those global truths, the moral truths, the foundation, the things that God speaks about, the moral issues.
Yes.
when you're talking about old truths versus new truths in our minds, you're not necessarily talking about those. How would you differentiate those for our listeners?
No, it's a great question. Maybe over my pay grade, as a theologian, but I would say certainly all truth is God's truth, and God is truth. Like we know that, and so there are those global, moral, ethical truths that and identity truths that I think God speaks to us as His creation. But these other things that are how we see the world are maybe lesser truths because we've defined them as our truth. So I shared that one about my own journey. I'll share another simple story. I'm going to mock myself in this, but we moved from Colorado to Southern California a number of years ago, and I love dogs. I grew up with dogs and cats, but we're not great dog owners. We always about our kids and living fully alive, and sometimes animals can hold you back. And so our daughter was 7, 8, 9 at the time, and just begging us for a dog. We hadn't had one in a long time, and we, Southern California is pricey, and so we live in this amazing neighborhood. But the homes are more smaller. I wouldn't even call it acreage, but smaller plots and no yards. And so a little patio, but no yards like we had in Colorado. And so we kept saying to her, and I kept saying, maybe an excuse, but it was truth. So you're asking about truth. We can't get a dog till we move from here and have a yard. This is too hard to have a dog here. And it was my answer to her for 2 or 3 years, and trusting where God's going to move us if this is the house for us or there's another one. And we were renting at the time, hoping to move at some point, although we love where we are. It was this truth I had set in motion. And then as I felt this, God, like, Jeff, you're being hard about this. It's been 2 or 3 years. She's growing up. She's probably 10 at the time. And I realized, why am I defining this? Everyone in our neighborhood has dogs. People walk their dogs all day long. If you walk in our neighborhood, you could go on a 15-minute walk and see 100 dogs. Big dogs, massive dogs. They live in the neighborhood. Too. They have no backyards. Like literally these lanai kind of patios. We live in a sort of a beach community. Everyone else has a dog and massive dogs. And I realized I had put a limiting belief on our ability to step into something because of how I saw the world in that situation. And again, I'm mocking myself in this, and it's less important than some of the bigger things in life, but I began to reshape. They don't need a yard. Why would we need a yard? And over a few months, I recognized I have a wall up that's holding me back from a possibility in life that either I didn't want or didn't foresee possible given the circumstances, and recognized there's a limit I placed on this scenario that doesn't really exist. In truth, that limit does not exist. And when I recognized that, we moved toward getting a dog. We got a little Maltipoo. It's the best dog in the world. If you're going to own a dog, and our daughter's been in heaven for 5+ years.
And you've kept it alive?
We've kept it alive, which is our third dog. The first two, we adopted out to family members when my wife and I weren't the best dog owners, but this one we've succeeded in. And so again, my new example in something inconsequential life, but imagine if you're doing that with your dreams. Imagine if you're doing that with your career. Well, I can't pivot in my career because I'm at this age, or I have the golden handcuffs, or man, God's always told me to do this, but I miss those moments. So many of our clients have recognized in life story that I miss those moments from God, and has He forgotten me? Or did I squander something? And I just believe God can always reorient you back to that passion, that desire. It may be an extra challenge of making that pursuit, but those limiting beliefs will hold us back. And it's as simple as looking at it from a different perspective and going, I've had the wrong perspective on this truth the entire time. And I can reframe that truth in a new way. And then all of a sudden I'm owning a dog that I couldn't, for years.
I love how you explained a limiting belief or a wall, missing the moments.
Sure.
Right? Like that's one of them that people can have. It's like, man, I missed it.
Yeah.
I missed my opportunity.
Sure.
And it's like, well, you just put a wall up where there maybe doesn't need to be a wall.
Sure.
Because as you described, God is bigger than you. Yeah, you missed it.
Sure.
Maybe more difficult now. May take you longer now, but it doesn't mean the dream has to be over. Right?
Yeah, certainly.
So there's a lot, and I actually love, Jeff, that analogy you're using of the wall, because I can totally, in fact, our audience can't see it, but right behind you, there's a wall.
Right.
And I'm looking at that, and it's kind of a fake rock wall. And I'm like, that's exactly what we put in front of ourselves. So we're going, well, limiting belief, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But on the other side of that wall, who knows what there is?
Yes.
That if we would just renew our mind, Romans 12:2, and recognize that that's a limiting belief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, I love that you brought that up. We talked about the blue sky potential earlier. That's that dream of everyone living in that fulfillment and fullness that God's created them for. we have these journeys, and a lot of people have this journey of quote unquote success. So from my stock market days, we love charts that are up and to the right.
Yep.
And so yet they stall out. And so it isn't just beliefs, it's beliefs that are formed by our circumstances. And so often between where we are now and that blue sky potential everyone has is this zone. People talk about on social media all the time. I call it the transformation zone. It's an opportunity to transform, to step into all that you are, to live and soar in that blue sky. But what happens, it gets clouded. Just much like an airplane trying to take off into the blue sky, there's clouds that come in. I call them clouds of confusion, clouds of uncertainty. They can be external, it can be politics, it can be the economy, it can be our workplace, it can be our health, it can be our relationships. Those external things that pressurize our beliefs, that pressurize our realities, much greater in consequence than whether I can have a dog with no yard. But we allow those things to start define what we're able to do and not able to do, what we're able to dream and not able to dream. Those are bad enough, but then what they often cause is internal clouds of confusion. So we've tried something and it didn't work out. And we've tried it twice and it didn't work out. So there's doubt that comes in. There's fear. Well, I can't try this new thing again because of the circumstances of our finances. And we just start to settle into the status quo. And people talk about the comfort zone all the time. I coined the term blue sky potential. I did not coin the term comfort zone, but so few people really talk about how to remove yourself from the comfort zone and how to actually transform through that opportunity zone to that blue sky. And it's, I think we berate the comfort zone for a reason, for good reason, but none of us, very few of us, I should say, end up in the comfort zone of status quo because we want to be there. Usually those clouds of confusion, those clouds of uncertainty, external and internal, trap us there. And Pat, for any length of time that the clouds block us from those dreams, we just begin to accept a life short of what we know we're made for. And even if we can't define what we're made for, we accept a life short of it. And when those clouds set in for any length of time, the darkness, the confusion, we often forget we're made for more. And that's where that discouragement, that despair, that, man, nothing in life feels like it brings meaning or value. And we chase relationships, or we chase success, or we chase finances, or we chase business growth. And we're chasing all the wrong things, but we can't figure out why it's not leading us to that destination. So those limiting beliefs aren't just internal. They come from those external things. They hold us back.
Yeah. Accountability is something you talk about too. Where does accountability come into this?
Yeah, it's a good question. We all need accountability.
It's a word that most of us really don't like, right?
It's like it squeezes us. We need it. It's easy to talk about. It's harder to accept and surrender to.
Yes. Yeah. And by the way, just for some people that are maybe triggered by that word, if you grew up in a very legalistic background, that is not probably a kind, healthy word to you. But if it's done well, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I push back on that word because I have a free, pioneer in me as well. Like, well, I want to dream, and accountability feels like constraint, right?
Yes.
But we all need it. So I'd say a couple things about accountability. For me, the strongest form of accountability is a self sort of intrinsic accountability to that calling, to that identity, to those core values and core burdens. If you don't know them, then it's hard to stay in alignment or accountable to those truths. If you do,
so can I interrupt for just a second, just to make sure I understand what you're saying? So you're in specifically what you're talking about right now. You're not necessarily talking about accountability where I'm meeting with someone and checking in with them once a week. You're saying like an organization will have core values written on the wall. You have your core values, you know what those are, and you're keeping yourself accountable to those. That's what you're referring to.
Sort of transcending accountability. That's my fight against traditional accountability.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Especially since I'm a free spirit.
Exactly. You love this new.
Thank you. You gave me an out.
I've rebranded accountability for you, Pat. What I love is, let me describe this. Even in the work I get to do, I get lumped into the genre of life coach, executive coach, business coach. It's fine. I'm not anti that. The world needs those. And in some ways, I'm one of those. But I call a coach, if you need to run faster, you're gonna hire a track coach, and they're gonna meet you at the track. They're gonna hold you accountable. They're gonna show up at 4:30 a.m. They're gonna kick your butt. They're gonna tell you what workouts to do. You need to do them faster. Hey, that lap wasn't as fast. Do it again. And that accountability and that coaching is going to lead to results. And if those are the results you're looking for, that accountability is priceless. And so again, as much as you and I might push away accountability, there's a real place in the marketplace for that. And it's necessary. And you'll get results. You'll run faster. In the work I get to do, and how I serve people these days is I consider myself more of a guide. And so I believe finding your life purpose, finding who God made you to be and why he put you here and what that means for you to do with your life, your career, your vocation, your relationships is less about how fast you run and productivity and the pursuit of being accountable to your goals. And it's more about like summiting Everest of finding your why. And that requires a guide. And is there a real result at the end of that? Yeah, you can get to the top of Everest, but it's not a coached journey. It's a walk alongside journey. And you want to bring someone in your life that has not only done that in their own life, but has proven track record of doing that with others. And is there going to be coaching along the way? Absolutely. You need to know how to survive the crevasse and climb on the ice letters and survive at each base camp. But there's a guidingness to that is transformative. And so
you're a Sherpa.
I'm a spiritual, vocational career Sherpa. That's a good way to put it. No one said it that way, but I love that. And so back to accountability, when you have that summit experience of why you're here, who God made you to be, and what that means in a real practical way, you've got all the accountability you need. It's written down, it's on paper. And so now it goes back to that talk about dreaming, that passive dreaming we talked about. Now I've got a dream, but I've got a blueprint for what achieving that dream looks like. And so I've got the blueprint. I'm going to live this out every day. And as I live into the truth of who God's made me to be, that dream comes closer and closer every single day.
And I love that, especially your term blueprint. You're going to sit down and build a house. What do you need? You need a blueprint. You don't just nail these two by fours together.
Sure.
Or you're going to get a weird looking house or a house that's unstable or whatever. It requires a blueprint, but I do think that a lot of us do get stuck with I do have dreams. I do have these things that God put in my heart, deep within my heart, my soul, but I don't know how to get there. And that's what you're describing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is a little bit how to get there.
Absolutely how to get there. It starts with the why, as you called out in me, but it is the how as well. It is that strategy. And so many great Christian leaders, professional, successful people, they've got their strategy for their business or their career. They've got I'm do some discipleship stuff at church and I'm growing spiritually, but rarely are those two integrated. They're rarely one and the same. And it's much like, my son plays college football. I love studying the NFL. I never played football, but I love the concept of teamwork and playbooks and being on the same page. You wouldn't have two offensive playbooks for the same team. Even if you have two different quarterbacks that kind of go in, I've got this package for this guy, but it can throw it off if you don't have a cohesive plan. Well, for leaders, what is my overall blueprint for who God's made me to be that informs my spiritual growth, that informs my career decisions? We don't want to work from two different playbooks. So
you're not dichotomizing
exactly.
those things.
They're not two separate rails. We're going to integrate those into one blueprint that impacts all those areas. And so that's that first step in that breakthrough is really discovering not just theologically your spiritual identity, your identity in Christ, but what does that mean, who he made me to be, who I really am, and how does that integrate into a blueprint?
Yeah. That is so good because I think what can happen for a lot of people, and I'm saying this because I grew up in the church.
Sure.
I was on church staff for a long time, is when people are talking about how do I find my purpose and my meaning, it usually goes to, well, how can you serve here on the weekend?
Sure.
Are you going to be a parking lot ministry? Or are you going to do our coffee ministry? Or are you going to be one of the ushers? But then you got the rest of your life.
Sure.
But what you're saying is, those go together. They don't have to be separate. They can be connected.
Absolutely. And listen, there is a place for serving in the local church.
Yeah.
I cut my teeth in it. That's how I found a lot of what
don't
I'm
hear me
gifted
wrong.
at.
I'm not saying there
we're
isn't.
both going to say that. However, if there is, which if is a rhetorical question, since there is a purpose for each of us, my guess is it goes beyond setting up the coffee stand.
Yeah.
Is that needed? Does that serve the local church? Does that make it winsome for when someone comes in, there's fresh coffee so they can attend church? Absolutely needed in the service of the local church.
And for someone, that's their core heart burden.
And that might be their core
values.
Absolutely. They might be gifted in it. They love it. It brings them live. They got a gift of hospitality. And it is the alignment of those things. But there's so many of us that we get stuck in, this is my place of volunteerism or my place of service. And then this is where I go make my money or lead my teams or grow my company. And when we can integrate those, that's where we come alive. We've been talking about that. And so it is that unleashing of those two. And when that happens, I think the church at large, capital C church, expands. The kingdom of God expands. Does that mean we hijack and eject from the local church? I don't think that's helpful, both to our own spiritual journey and the local church. But how do we sort of transcend those classic definitions of this is what I do for work and this is what I do for volunteerism and find that purpose?
I love that you use that phrase, kingdom of heaven or kingdom of God. In the Gospels, Jesus uses that 152 times, something like that, kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God. And I'm convinced the older I get, the kingdom is so much bigger than we can even imagine. And it encompasses every area of life. That's why I love that you use that. It encompasses setting up the coffee table at your local church or working in the parking lot ministry. But it also encompasses when you're going to work during the week and when you're doing the dishes and when you're doing the laundry and when you're changing dirty diapers. Kingdom of God is all of those things.
Yes.
And that's kind of what you're saying is you're trying to help people line their lives and live with passion, but in every area of their life.
Yeah, we ask these questions, how do I find the will of God for my life? How do I find that purpose God has for me? And for me, it starts in more the global, generic, that isn't generic in Scripture, but it's not specific to our day in this, modern age. But love God with all your heart, mind, strength, and love God with all your heart, mind, strength, and soul. Am I saying it right? It's gone. It's eluding me. Love others as yourself. When you do that, you're closer to your purpose than 95% of people. When you're loving God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength and loving others as yourself, start there. And when you do that, it's going to open up opportunities to have more impact and more purpose. Next, it's classic
but can I just jump in really quick
go for
again?
It.
To jump in again, though, this goes back to, again, what you were saying, like how someone will love God with all their heart, mind, soul, and spirit and love others as themselves, which Jesus summed up as the greatest commandments. How they'll do that will look a little different. This goes back to what you said at the beginning. Based on what my core heart burden is, my core values are, I may love this person a little differently than this other person will love that person just because of those things. Okay,
absolutely. No, and it's true. And go back to the volunteerism real quick, and I'll come back to that next one. When I was early in church, volunteered to teach, Sunday school when I was a young adult. Or newly married. I didn't love the platform. I didn't love being in front of people, but here I was stretching that gift in front of 4th through 6th graders. I found I loved not the teaching part, but the bringing them alongside, encouraging them. That was a burden coming out. When I helped coach my son's baseball teams and football teams, I couldn't tell you X's and O's in football. I could tell you a little bit about baseball, but I was the dugout coach encouraging the kid that just struck out, and that's that burden coming alive. So just serve where you can. We had a big Easter drama in our church for years, and I was invited a couple times to be a disciple. So you got to grow out a beard. I can't grow a beard, Pat, to save my life. That's not my life calling or burden to be an actor, but I tested it, right? And I learned through that. So love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love others as yourself, and do that in those unique ways and find them. That you're going to fulfill God's will in your life more than 95% of the people if you just start doing that well. Certainly the Great Commission follows that as you go into all the world. But we forget there's the movement of missiology and sending missionaries throughout the world, and it's important. But that sometimes gets like go, right, and leave. But the real etymology of the really original language says as you're going. So that can inspire us as marketplace leaders. And listen, there's a heroicism to being a missionary and having that walk of faith and trusting God for fundraising and being in risky, challenging territory. I don't want to sell that short. But there's a risk in the marketplace of living your life of faith in front of your colleagues, in front of your vendors, in front of your clients. And so as you're going, you can really live a purpose in the marketplace as well, and leading others to understanding, being that light for them in the world. And then I just believe a couple other scriptures really inform our purpose. It comes out of, it's a cliche verse, but it's Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, not to harm you, but to give you a hope, a future, and prosper you. There is, when you look at that original Hebrew, that it's not just the plans God thinks toward you, but that original language of think is I've architected plans for you. I've designed and crafted plans for you. So trusting that as you're moving forward in your life, your ministry career. And then we're told we're his masterpiece, we're his workmanship. And there is in that a uniqueness that we can bring to bear that no one else can. And as you find from that global general purpose and will of God in your life to that specificity of what is your unique artistry that you bring to the world, man, we can live on fire for God and find that purpose.
Speaking of this really quick, and we'll have to wrap up here soon, but speaking of this really quick, because I love how you were talking about the architect and you were going back to the original Hebrew of Jeremiah 29:11. that it's not just saying that he thinks a plan
Sure.
for you, but he architects a
Sure.
plan for you. So again, I just know that we have some listeners that are going, okay, Jeff, I love that idea that he has an architect plan for
Sure.
me, that there's a blueprint plan.
Right.
Why won't he show me?
Yeah. Yes.
You know, so I'm just speaking as I know how some of our
Yes.
listeners are thinking maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas like I keep asking, I'm saying, show me your will, show me what you want me to do, show me but he doesn't seem to be
Sure.
telling me. It seems to be a mystery. All I get is like, take this next corner.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a challenging situation.
As we're wrapping up this episode, be sure to leave us a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment on something you'll take away. All right, let's hop back into the remainder of the episode.
And that's often where we meet most of our clients, is in that question mark of like, hey, the clouds are in front of me. I'm not sure. I've been asking God. He's not answering in the way he used to, or I'm not hearing in the way I used to. How do I navigate that journey? And I would say it starts with, like I said, integrating your spiritual identity with your marketplace identity, if you will, and working with someone that can help you do that and really find that. I think step 2 is, and this is going to sound maybe heretical, not theologically, but in practice, as people who love personal development, you almost have to stop personal development. It's not enough. If we want to grow, personal development's the right way. But if we want to transform into that better version of ourselves, it requires a true transformation, not incremental growth, but true transformation. And so you have to seek a process that's going to bring about that transformation. And there are plenty of times in life I've asked those questions, and you just go and you trust God, and he orchestrates our steps. We're told he moves us right or left from behind us and does that. But then there's times where that kind of runs out, and the stakes are higher, and I need that transformational breakthrough. And so that's necessary. And then I would say bring someone alongside that can guide you, whether that's a mentor, a pastor, someone who's done it before. And for me, I've had to do this. This is just genuine. Sometimes you need to invest in that, because the investment is where you get skin in the game, and that breakthrough truly happens. And the investment can be blood, sweat, tears, effort, energy, all those things we've always done. But sometimes I need a professional that's going to guide me to where I'm trying to get. And in my own journey, all this work I've shared with you comes out of navigating this and then reverse engineering how I did it. You know, multitude of careers in a multitude of industries. How did I make those breakthrough moments when God wasn't speaking? But then ultimately, I can probably figure it out. And our listeners who are stuck there, you're going to figure it out. If you continue to listen to God, it might be 18 months, 36 months, 3 to 5 years. And that, for you and I, we've probably had those journeys where if it wasn't for those wilderness seasons, we don't get to where we are. But sometimes the stakes are high enough. I don't have 18 months. I don't have 36 months to answer these questions. I need leverage. I need to invest in a process and a leader or a mentor or a guide who's going to help me have that breakthrough and answer those questions, because that's what they're gifted to do. And once I get that, I'm off and running. And that helps clear those clouds out of the way and sets me in motion to that blue sky.
Yeah. Well, this sets us up really well to ask you, how can people get a hold of you? Because I totally agree with what you're saying. And where it's always hard for someone to do this themselves, let me do this for you. Then. Because I would really encourage if some of our listeners are stuck and are just like, man, I love what Jeff is saying, but I just don't know how to get there, or I've tried in the past. Well, reach out to Jeff. This is what you do. So how would people get a hold of you? Where would they find your material?
Yeah, the easiest place is just a website based on my name, Jeff Rasor. We were talking about this earlier, JEFFRASOR, pronounced like a Z, but jeffrasor.com.
Razor.
Yeah, Razor, exactly. Not Racer or Razor, but Jeff Rasor. Like the Razor scooter or the Razor shaver, but no Z. And that's the easiest place to find me. Instagram at jeffrasor.com is there as well. You can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn as well. And I would say I've had to do that in my seasons where there was a gap between where I was and where I wanted to be.
Me too.
And I've made significant investments in coaching and mentoring because I recognized someone had journeyed ahead of me and had figured out all the hard steps and would help me do that more quickly. Now, I love, as a high achiever, the I can solve it, I can find it. Many of our listeners, that's the frustration. I've always been able to solve my way through this. And for some reason in this season, I can't. And I would say it's usually that moment of, hey, if I really want this, I'm going to have to draw a line in the sand, invest my whole self into it, maybe even some finances, and get that transformation and breakthrough I need.
Yeah. Well, and what I love that you're saying, and we'll wrap this up then, Jeff, is I used to, in fact, I posted this years ago on social media, you have no idea where you'll be or what you'll be doing 5 years from now. Now I laugh about that and I go, 5 years from now, you have no idea where you'll be or what you'll be doing a year from now. But that does, and that just speaks to there's a lot of mystery in life, right?
Sure.
If you've lived life long enough, you would be nodding in agreement with what I said. Like you had a plan and whoop, it went this way now. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a blueprint
Sure.
to guide you
Sure.
through the mystery of life.
Sure.
And that the fact is that following Jesus or living, even if you're a listener and you don't believe in Jesus or God, you're still living your life in such a way that it's a journey with a lot of mystery.
Sure.
And as a Jesus follower, it's the same thing. There's
Sure.
a lot of mystery.
Sure.
But what you're providing is a blueprint
Absolutely.
that can really help navigate the mystery of life or the mystery of the journey.
Absolutely. And it really, it sounds theoretical, but when you get that blueprint, it's a God-breathed blueprint. I'm not going to tell our clients you should do this or do that. I'm going to help you hear from God through a series of frameworks that really does create that blueprint. Just like you'd build a building, you can see if you're in alignment with that building or not, according to the blueprint. And so it gives you the gift of being able to navigate those decisions, those mysteries, with more certainty. Does it replace our walk with God and the work of the Holy Spirit to guide us? No, but it does give us a frame of reference, a map or a compass, if you will, that allows me to evaluate. This totally aligns, this opportunity, this new role, this new business I want to start, this new ministry, whatever opportunity is coming across, this relationship, this volunteering, this board seat I'm on. Does it align with who I'm made to be? If it does, I get to surrender that to God and say, God, this aligns, that matches the blueprint perfectly. I'm inclined to say yes to doing this, but if you don't want me to do it, I'll listen and give me a reason not to. Or none of this aligns. I would have been inclined in my own self to just say yes, because I say yes to opportunities, but there's no alignment here. It's going to slow me down. It's going to take me off course.
Frustrating.
So it's going to be frustrating. I'm going to hit a dead end. So God, I'm inclined to say no, because you gave me this blueprint. But if you want me to say yes for something I can't see, I'll listen. But it allows us, and here's the real fruit of having a true blueprint that you can trust, that is God-breathed. It allows me to say yes to the right things and no to the wrong things, which is base level decision making. But it's important for high achievers and leaders that have a lot of opportunity that comes their way, or a lot on their plate, or this elusive work-life balance. What do I say yes and no to? Well, you know what to say yes and no to, but it gets more nuanced than that. When you have a bulletproof God-breathed blueprint, you can say yes to the greater yeses and say no to the lesser yeses. And I think that's where real aliveness comes, and fulfillment is recognizing this is a good yes, but it's going to hold me back from a greater yes. And because I have this blueprint, I know exactly what those greater yeses are. And man, that leads to more impact, more fulfillment, more joy, more of what God has for you.
Yeah. I really like what you just said there, the greater yes.
Sure.
We settle for good.
Sure.
When God really wants great.
Sure.
For us.
And we want great
through us.
We just don't know how to line it up to get there. So we're guessing until we have that blueprint.
Yeah, so good. Well, I really encourage our listeners, reach out.
Sure.
We'll have the information you gave, we'll have it in our description as well.
And it's no pressure. This is the pastor in me. You felt this. I love these conversations. So it's no obligation. Let's jump on a call, on a Zoom, and let's just talk about how you're doing and what God's up to. And if we can serve, we'll look at that. But if not, we're going to point you where best to serve whatever you need.
Yep. And I would highlight, if we have listeners that are in their teens, 20s, early 30s, this is such an important piece, because you're just trying to figure that out anyway. Well, I often say in our 20s, we're trying to prove ourselves. In our 30s, we're finally figuring out who we are. So that would be a perfect time for you to reach out to Jeff and just help him navigate that. If you're in your 40s or 50s, it's not over.
It's not over.
If you can get really aligned to those things, and then if you're 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, I don't care how old you are, as long as you got another day, there's a reason to get aligned with why God put you here.
I'd say there's two major windows. Your 20s, 30s, if you can find this out before most people find it out, you're going to set a trajectory no one else has had. Yeah. Usually there's a I can solve it need, so inside of like, I got this. And so the hunger and the stakes aren't always quite as high. But if you're forward thinking and you don't want to make all the mistakes you would till your 40s, I'd say do it. Most of our clients actually are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that they've lived a lot of life. They've been bumped around. They've had a track record of success. And then they're like, what is this all for? And they have that second half of life, or that third or fourth quarter, some of my clients will say it, that man, I want to reorient this. And now I'm equipped to really step into all that God has for me. So we were talking about this earlier. No age is too late. If you're here, you got a purpose. I've had clients in their 70s that have hit that wall and like, I've got life in front of me. I want to find it.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun.
I love that. I love that. Well, 2 truths and a lie. We always end with this one. It's kind of ironic because no gray areas. I'm going to ask you to lie to me. So you're going to give me 3 statements.
Yeah.
2 of them will be truths. 1 will be a lie. I have to try to guess what the lie is. And this is a fun way for our audience to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm going to embarrass myself on this, but this is always my go-to in this game. So truth 1, I've never been stung by a bee. Truth 2, I was, as a young man, early teenager, a competitive accordion player. And number 3, truth number 3 that you get to decipher is I've run a sub 3-hour marathon.
Oh, man, those are good. So you've never been stung by a bee.
Maybe.
Accordion player.
Competitive accordion player.
And sub 3-hour marathon. I'm going to go with the sub 3 hour is a truth.
Is that your guess?
Yeah, that's
one of your guesses?
Down to 50-50.
Okay,
so
all right.
I'm going to say that's true.
Okay.
Am I right?
Not true. It's a dream. It's a dream.
You got me
but
right
that
away.
is the one that hasn't happened.
Wait, you've never been stung by a bee?
Never been stung by a bee, and I was a competitive accordion player.
No.
Those are both true.
No. Okay, who gave you the accordion?
Oh, man. My dad grew up in music with his family, and when we were little, he got cold called by a local accordion school, and my brother and I had not played an instrument, and they said, can we put your kids in accordion lessons for a month for free? And I remember they came over and we put them on, and we just started doing lessons when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. And I probably played till I was 15. And my parents' basement has the boxes of trophies to prove that I was both competitive and successful. Yeah. And my kids still ask me, Dad, do you know music? I was like, I knew how to read music. I knew nothing about music theory. And I can't read music like that anymore. So,
I have fond memories of the accordion because the school I went to from 2nd grade through 12th grade, the superintendent of the school would play the accordion.
Oh my goodness.
And so we would start school with us singing or something, and he'd have the accordion. And then I went back after I graduated, and I was a teacher there for almost 10 years.
Wow.
He was still the superintendent, and he still played the accordion.
There's no way we connected over accordion in this podcast.
Yes.
The strangest of things.
Accordion. Well, there's no joke to play that, though.
Yeah, it was real.
You're doing you're moving that thing. You're playing the piano over here. And I don't even know all this stuff, but
it's been a long time.
Well, all right, you got me.
I do want to run a sub 3-hour marathon. That's on the dream list. So I'm trying to put action to those dreams. We'll see if it happens.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you, Pat.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Wow. This conversation with Jeff was packed with truth and practical tools to help you step into your God-given purpose. Stay tuned for more episodes every other Wednesday. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll see you next time on No Gray Areas.